Nammo Phat. Good morning. Thank you for joining me for today's daily practice check-in. Listen, listen, listen. This beautiful sound calls us back to our true home. The third mindfulness training. Aware of the suffering caused by sexual misconduct, I vow to cultivate responsibility and learn ways to protect the safety and integrity of individuals, couples, families, and society. I am determined not to engage in sexual relations without love and a long-term commitment. To preserve the happiness of myself and others, I am determined to respect my commitments and the commitments of others. I will do everything in my power to protect children from sexual abuse, to prevent couples and families from being broken by sexual misconduct. Today we're beginning a new essay from Ajahn Thanissaro's book, The Karma of Questions. The title is Perennial Issues. Toward the end of World War II, Aldous Huxley published an anthology, The Perennial Philosophy, proposing that there is a common core of truths to all the world's great religions. These truths clustered around three basic principles: that the self is by nature divine, and that this nature is identical with the divine ground of being, and that the ideal life is one spent in the quest to realize this non-dual truth. In the years since Huxley published his anthology, the idea of a perennial philosophy has exerted wide influence. In particular, it has opened the minds of many Westerners to the idea that religions of the East, such as Buddhism, have something valuable to offer, and that the preference of one religion over another could be simply a matter of personal taste. People with a positive relationship to the Judeo-Christian tradition could adopt Buddhist teachings and practices without conflict. Those with a negative relationship to the Judeo-Christian tradition could find spiritual nurture in Buddhism, free from the faith demands of the synagogue or the church. In this way, the idea of a perennial philosophy has eased the way of many Westerners into Buddhist thought and practice. And to this day, the principles of the perennial philosophy, as outlined by Huxley and the host of perennial philosophers who have followed in his wake, have provided an underpinning for how Buddhism is taught in the West. When Rumi is quoted in a Dhamma talk, the perennial philosophy is speaking. But even though the idea of a perennial philosophy has provided an opening to the Dhamma, the question arises, is it reliable? Has it distorted the Dhamma in the process? A good way to answer these questions is to take a closer look at the tenets of perennial philosophy to see how they stand up to scrutiny on their own strengths, at the same time comparing them with what the Buddha taught. Perennial philosophers base their thinking on two claims. The first is a fact claim. All the great religious traditions of the world share a common core of beliefs. The second is a value claim. The commonality of these beliefs is proof that they are true. The idea of such a perennial philosophy is attractive. It suggests a way of arriving at religious truths that are universal and objective, rather than culturally conditioned. It offers a plot of common ground where different religions, instead of fighting over their differences, can live in harmony and peace. In fact, some perennial philosophers maintain that the objectivity of perennial philosophy makes it so scientifically respectable that it can provide the framework by which all human knowledge, spiritual and scientific, can be brought together in an overarching theory that allots to each body of knowledge its proper function and place. However, there are problems with both of the claims on which perennial philosophy is based, problems that undermine the validity of the perennial philosopher's project and deflect their attention from more important issues that any quest for spiritual objectivity should address. The problems with the fact claim derived from the methodology used for establishing the common core of the great traditions. The central question tackled by the perennial philosophy, we are told, is that of our true identity. What is my true self? And the answer to that question is that our true self is identical with being as a whole. We are all one, and our common identity extends to the ground and source of all things. To arrive at this answer, though, the perennial philosophers have had to discount many of the teachings found in most of the world's major religions that posit a separate identity for each person, and a creator of the universe separate from its creation. To get around this difficulty, perennial philosophers have tried to limit the range of what they mean by a great religious tradition. They draw the line around this concept in one of two ways. The first is to draw a distinction, inherited from the Romantics, between conventional religious doctrines and the insights of direct religious or mystical experience. Mystical experience is the direct apprehension of inner truths. Conventional doctrines are the corruption of those truths formulated by people of a lower level of religious inspiration, influenced by social, cultural, or political factors. Thus, perennial philosophers claim that they are justified in ignoring conventional doctrines and drawing their raw data only from reports of mystical experience, for these are closest to the truths of direct experience. The problem here is that many accounts of direct religious experiences do not support the tenets of perennial philosophy. The Buddha's awakening is a case in point. That awakening obviously qualifies as a direct religious experience, and yet the descriptions of it found in the earliest records, the Pali Canon, contain nothing to support the perennial philosophy's answer to the question of personal identity. They don't even address the question. In fact, there are passages in the Pali Canon where the Buddha denounces questions of identifying and being. Who am I? What am I? Do I exist? Do I not exist? As inappropriate entanglements, blocking the path to awakening. May all beings be well. May all beings be happy. May all beings be peaceful. Sadhu. 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 Thank you for joining me this morning.